Those who do not know, my name is Jake Tullis, and I run a digital asset hedge fund or a crypto fund called Bleeding Edge Capital out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And if you want to learn more about me, my background, or my fund, make sure you click the link in the banner. Also, a lot of you are not subscribed. It would mean the world to us if you just click the subscribe button if you enjoy content like this. Okay, people are asking, what do you mean Bitcoin is deflationary? And I want to dive into that very specifically. I have charts, and it's complex because you have to understand that you've been indoctrinated to believe the dollar is something that it is not.
The dollar is going to get stronger and stronger.
And really, all the dollar is an accounting system. It is how we keep track of things, essentially. It's a ledger. The dollar is a ledger. And it goes down in value over time, okay? Because we keep making more of them. That's really important to understand. So, if this was the only lighter in the world, it could be worth a lot of money. Like, imagine if out of 8 billion people, we all had to make fire with this one lighter. We basically had to keep swapping it between one another. This thing could be worth billions for all I know. But since we can make these for a penny and sell them for 25 cents or whatever, they're completely worthless. I mean, you can just lose them and buy more. They're so bountiful, they're so plentiful that they are not valuable at all. And so as you increase the volume, the supply of a specific thing, that specific thing, right? You need more of them to equal the same value. If I wanted one lighter, it could be worth $1 billion, and then now they're worth $1, I would need 1 billion lighters to reach $1 billion in value. Okay, now I actually want to show you some charts that explain this for the visual learners out there. Okay, so first, what you're looking at is the supply of Bitcoin. Everyone's like, oh, they make more every day, da 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 da. But the reality is we actually make less over time. That's the deflation part. This Bitcoin supply is going down and price is going up. To give you another example of how it's deflationary, median home prices priced in Bitcoin. It once cost 340,000 Bitcoin to buy a house. Now it costs 4.4 Bitcoin to buy a house. And in the same time, it went from 226 to 400. So we've almost doubled the amount of dollars that are needed to buy the same property, but the amount of Bitcoin needed has been reduced by 99%. That inverse relationship is also deflationary. And this chart shows you how many more dollars they are making. So since 2011, 9 trillion up to 22 trillion. So it's more than double. And the house prices literally follow the same pattern. If I were to put any other chart, the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, gold, all looks the same. And that's because if there are more dollars in the world, it will take more dollars to buy the same unit of anything denominated in dollars. So what you actually have happening is Bitcoin staying the same value, the dollar is getting weaker beneath it, therefore you need more dollars to buy a Bitcoin. And that is deflation. That is exactly what that is, right? And as they print more money, it's going to take more money to buy the same thing. That's inflation. Inflation is bad for your average Joe. It's really bad. It means groceries cost more, your cost of living goes up, the cost of a house goes up. It's called a wealth gap. As we put more dollars into the thing, into the thing that you're investing in, the assets, the Bitcoin, the real estate, assets are going to go up because there's more dollars. So as asset prices go up, the rich get richer, the cost of living goes up, but since the rich have assets, they go up proportionally. They don't feel it. But someone with no assets and just dollars, they're getting inflated away year over year. Bitcoin is the best hedge. It just is. If you go look at gold compared to the dollar, it looks similar to Bitcoin, but the returns aren't the same. Gold's not giving you 88% a year. It just isn't. It's almost impossible to outperform Bitcoin, even at 2.5 trillion. And it's because our government, and every single government, is addicted to hitting the print button when things get hard. Even Trump, he betrayed us with that. I mean, he really did. You can say whatever you want. I am an American first. I don't care about who's in the office in that sense. I only care if it's good for America and good for my investors. Trump is good for our investors. I don't know if he's good for America after the big beautiful bill. I would have had a different opinion if he didn't just add $4 trillion to our deficit. He said he was going to fix the deficit went from 123 to now 132%. That's increasing the deficit, not fixing it. He ran on fixing it, he's not. So even Trump can't help it. And honestly, if he's printing money, I don't see anyone else that doesn't. I don't. And I don't see any sensibility returning to any government ever. So the best way to hedge against bad policy is to invest in assets. And I don't know of a better asset giving you average returns like Bitcoin. And that's why I'm here in this seat talking to you all. That's why you're listening to videos like this. Good on you for doing that. But Bitcoin is deflationary. Buying Bitcoin is hedging the dollar. The dollar will always be worse because of bad policy. You can't lose. And if you just buy the dips over time, it's going to keep going up because of the addiction of printing money. It's the best way to make money off of bad policy that I've been able to find. There are a lot of people who, think there's 21 million Bitcoin out there for grabs. And the reality is it's not true. It's a much smaller number. So I want to go into the supply mechanics of Bitcoin to help you all understand Bitcoin as an investment, if you're interested in Bitcoin or not. First, it is true that the network Bitcoin, and it is kind of confusing because in Bitcoin, that is the name of the token and also the network. In Ethereum, there's the Ethereum network, then there's Ether, the token. So there is a separation there, but in Bitcoin, it's both. So I'll say Bitcoin network and Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just the token. 21 million Bitcoins, that breaks down into 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis, which is the smallest unit of account in Bitcoin. If you've heard stacking Satoshis, that's what they're talking about. Just buy little bits. You don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin, right? You can buy a little bit. 1/10,000th at a time, I think. If that's the right math, or it could be 1/1000th. I forget. Quadrillion to million might be 10,000, to be honest. Either way, is go look at that 21 million, how it breaks down. So follow me over here. We're going to show you this chart, which I think is a really interesting chart, okay? It shows the wallets that have not moved their tokens, like since 2010, 2017. I think it's actually for 6 years, dormant tokens. As you can see here, this wallet, we're looking at, that's 100,000 Bitcoin, 100,000 here, 200,000, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 300,000. Let's call it 500,000 Bitcoin that is dormant. And then you have Satoshi. So you got 500,000 to, let's say, 1 million that is dormant, meaning never moved. These are people that could have died, right? People that lost their keys. There's many examples of this where people are like, I'll pay you millions of dollars if you help me figure this out, right? So really, there's less. And this is just from people forgetting their keys, ultimately. Oh, that's going back 8 years. Got it. So that's why Satoshi's not on this list here. Sorry for the slow network here. There's 1.1 million in Satoshi, the founder's wallet, okay? That means, realistically, we're talking about 19 million, and then out of the 19 million, there's 2 million locked up to be mined. So really, we're talking about 16, 17 million Bitcoin that's available. And then you got to think about how many people are willing to sell you their Bitcoin. Now, see, they tell you 20 million, but check this out. These guys, total circulating Bitcoin, straight line up, very fixed. It's going up 1,000 every few days. I thought, this is some interesting things here. If you were mining Bitcoin, the days, it's pretty interesting. But, you have to consider that the supply is dripped, and that drip gets cut in half every 4 years. We just had a halving last year, back I think April 24th. So the supply that is available, right? That is going down. The actual supply that you have available to buy is going up. That is decreasing. However, you have an excess of 4 million Bitcoin that are likely to never be recovered or active in the network. You also have people like Michael Saylor saying he's going to burn his keys. So that's 600,000 Bitcoin and growing. You also have Trump saying he's never going to sell his Bitcoin. Then you have the EU starting to explore it as a treasury asset, right? Treasuries don't sell things usually. The HODL strategy means the actual supply available to be purchased is at best a couple million, in my opinion. If you go through all the big whales that are holding a more than 10,000 Bitcoin, they're never going to sell it. They take loans on it. People don't have to sell it. It's an asset. You can get leverage on the asset tax free because loans are, debt instruments are not taxable. So if I have 10,000 Bitcoin at 100K a pop, I got, what is that? $1 billion or 100 million. It's one or the other. But let's just say I needed to buy something. Okay, 10% of that you could get debt on. Whatever you buy, the cash flow covers the debt service and then some. And you never have to sell your Bitcoin, and you just bought an asset, and that asset will pay off the loan on the Bitcoin, and then you can rinse and repeat. People don't have to sell it. And we're only going, as leveraged products hit traditional markets, we're only going to see that expand. So really, the supply is very, very low, and that's why it's still volatile. People ask me, why is it still so volatile when there's $2 trillion in it, right? The reality is that $2 trillion spread across a couple million tokens. We all trade between one another. Very volatile. And that window is shortening, basically. Bitcoin does have 21 million. The Bitcoin network has 21 million Bitcoins, but the Bitcoins that are accessible to retail and people like you and me and anyone else, it is just dwindling over time. I always tell people it's riskier to be out of Bitcoin and crypto than in crypto and Bitcoin. Okay, that's my stance, always has been. And, I just see it becoming a bigger and bigger asset class over time. So that's the true supply of Bitcoin, everybody. We're going to be talking about something in Bitcoin that is crashing aggressively that could dramatically impact your ability to purchase Bitcoin, believe it or not. Volume of Bitcoin on exchanges, y'all. It is cratering in real time. So the green is how many Bitcoins sit on exchanges. And this is real. We went from, in 2024, we went from 2.6 million to now only having 2 million. So we have taken almost 600,000 Bitcoin off exchanges. What does that mean? Well, it means that less and less and less Bitcoin is going to be available in liquidity that you can participate in. A lot of people do not understand how complex the Bitcoin market is. If you have a lot of Bitcoin, you can't go to these exchanges. Like, you just can't. The price slippage alone in an exchange on 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 Bitcoin, hundreds of millions of dollars, genuinely is going to affect you in the tens and 20s of millions. There's this whole other world that is exclusive to the elite in crypto, and they are winning. That pool, if you will, of people or individuals that invest in crypto is called OTC. We have exchange volume crashing, and that means we're also going to have this grow in size. And I think the amount of Bitcoin that ends up in this, the threshold could be lowered because of how many people are going to be self-custodying their Bitcoin. And maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe there's a third party that's going to be custodying Bitcoin. I think these 600,000 Bitcoin that are off exchanges are actually sitting in cold storage as a representation of all these ETFs, because that number loosely aligns with how many Bitcoins are held by all these ETFs that have come out for the Bitcoin. But either way, as Bitcoin moves off exchanges, the growth of over-the-counter desks. Now, it's going to sound crazy, but basically what OTC Bitcoin trading is, it is a buyer and a seller of large amounts of Bitcoin, generally above a few hundred. So we're talking, 100 would be 10 million and up. You can't really put out a 10 million sell order on Coinbase, mainly because Coinbase and a lot of exchanges, what they actually do to keep their order book succinct is they will actually front the buys and then fill the sells, but they're not going to front 10 million. Does that make sense? Like, they're going to actually buy your Bitcoin for you and then fill sell orders behind you so you have a better user experience of putting in a trade and boom. Otherwise, your order could sit there in the order book for a long time waiting to be filled. And then in that time of it being filled, the price could fluctuate so much. Your 10 million could be 7.5 or 12.5. And then you have to set your slippage is what that's called. Okay, so the time it takes for the order to be filled, there's this slippage. And that slippage on a lot of money can really affect the trade. There's these private markets where there's a broker in between, or fence, and they are meeting buyers and sellers that have either demand for 10 million plus Bitcoin, or they have 10 million Bitcoin they'd like to sell. There's a fixed discount, but it's cheaper than the slippage. So like if you might slip 5 points on a market like Coinbase, right? You pay a 2% discount and then a 1% commission, let's say. So you're out 3 instead of 5, if that makes sense. And it's a fixed thing. It's secure. Everyone has a third party involved. It is riddled with scams, and it's a totally unregulated market. It's just two citizens of the world meeting and dispensing Tether for Bitcoin and Bitcoin for Tether. But in general, what we're going to see, I think, is an increase in people keeping their Bitcoin on exchanges, which means you're going to have people thinking long term, and there's going to be a supply shock. We're not going to have as mumuch Bitcoin to trade hands. The halving cycle plus large institutions buying a ton and putting it on cold storage, like the IBIT, they have 180 something. They almost have more Bitcoin than the United States of America. China and America together don't even have as much as MicroStrategy. So we're just seeing a global race for this stuff, and it's getting ripped off exchanges, and all of those players are going to be buying on an OTC market. I just think you and I, like, as individuals, are really going to struggle getting good market rates. We're going to have to, eventually, people are going to have to go to people that have been sitting on it for 10 years in cold storage and be like, hey, will you give me some Bitcoin? And then you're going to get a premium, not a discount. I think that's the future of Bitcoin. That's how serious the supply shock is. And I think it's only going to get worse or better if you own Bitcoin. I'm not saying the window is shrinking, but the data suggests that there are precedents for the supply that normal people can trade is getting smaller, which is great for Bitcoin price, but long term, if you're a laggard, also bad for you. You decide. Which camp are you in? I am in the early adopter camp. Been doing this since 2018-ish. So I love it. And it's one of the best decisions I ever personally made. That's why I started a hedge fund. This space is awesome. Hey everybody, it's JT. Just in case you didn't know, I would love a sub. Almost 97% of you that have viewed our content have not subscribed, and it would mean the world to me if you just hit that sub button, give us a like, and let us know how we're doing. We're going to be talking about crypto and its everyday use case for making purchases. A lot of people are under the conception that this technology is just for peer-to-peer transactions, which, if I zoom all the way up, talking 100,000 feet in the air, that is true. But really, you have to understand the nuances, the details of this stuff to really understand if it's going to be used for everyday currencies like transactions. Like I buy coffee in Bitcoin as an example, which is what a lot of people think, and it's wrong. Spoiler alert, I will show you why it's wrong in a second. I want to go into this concept of what you'll actually be using crypto for 20 years from now. We're expanding 20 years. Okay, we're going deep. And we're thinking long. 20 years from now, most of the financial system will be on chain. It'll be on blockchain rails, okay? On chain and online, it's going to be the same thing. They're going to be indiscernible. In fact, I think 20 years from now, you're not even going to know that you're on chain, because developers in all industries are going to choose to build using blockchains for a lot of reasons. Most importantly, security, believe it or not. Mainstream media might have scared you away, but in general, these are the most secure systems in the world. Even the most centralized blockchain is more secure than Amazon or Apple. And I'm not going to talk about that today, but it's objectively true. You disagree? Go look at any of my content. We probably have 1,000 hours of content out there now. We talk about this all the time. It is the most secure database in the world. A blockchain is, and really any of them. And it's because of how they build it. And I talk about that. So everyone's on chain. All the monies are on chain. And y'all think that Bitcoin will be used. That is just not true, okay? The most likely reality is you're going to have a stable coin either from the government in the form of a CBDC, that means the token doesn't move, it just stays at $1, or it's going to be a lot of stable coins, and you'll just pick the one that you like, or whichever one is adopted by the system you're on. You won't really know. It'll be a database thing happening in the background, right? I don't think you're going to see USDC. I think you're going to see a cash sign in dollars, and there's just going to be an equivalent of USDC on the database in the background, right? You're going to swipe your card, and the dollars leaving your bank account, just like now, are just going to be tokens leaving your wallet, but it would be account and dollars, right? We need to obfuscate the difficulty of this industry for it to be adopted mainstream. And the UX is getting there. The user experience is getting there. Okay, that's my preface. I'll stop complaining. I'll stop laboring on. All right, there's something I need to show you guys as to why we're not going to be using Bitcoin for everyday purchases, right? And this stablecoin outcome is the most likely outcome. Outside of the fact that stablecoins don't change in value. So like, even if Bitcoin reaches mass adoption, it's still going to be on the public markets being traded. But people going in and out of Tether does not affect the Tether token. See what I'm saying? So when you get paid in dollars, it stays that amount of dollars. And that's going to persist, okay? No one's going to expect their entire net worth to go up and down 5, 10, 20% in a day. It's not feasible. In addition to that, we also have the reality, fastest blockchains per second, okay? Now let's do Visa. Look at that. So our fastest blockchain has not even broken the theoretical required speed to support hundreds of a million transactions an hour, okay? Now let's go look at Bitcoin. See that? You see any Bitcoin here? It's on the second page, maybe? Wow. That's not a typo. It does 4 transactions a second. And this is the target for every blockchain, to support that many users. The difference, but let's just round this to 5, is 1,000 times slower than Visa. Visa takes 7 days to settle a transaction roughly. You swiping your card and doing all that happens real fast, but the actual transaction, the account balancing, doesn't happen for an extended period of time. In crypto, when you swipe your card, the transaction settles with the transaction. That's the big difference of the financial systems. In the financial systems, you have a messaging, so the transaction's 2 steps. The ledgers of the purchaser and the seller, right? Their ledgers balance, minus 100 plus 100, let's say, and then they roll up and roll up and roll up and roll up and roll up, right? All the way to, the top. And it takes days for the money to actually settle and be sent. Visa and MasterCard actually get in between this process to allow you to take a micro loan of like $500 from a firm or your bank. I mean, anyone will do $500, like no big deal. Or you can only send $500 from Venmo as a max, as an example, because that's all MasterCard or Visa is willing to finance until the money's actually settled. So like the settlement of transactions takes days at 5,000 to 24,000 TPS, which would mean that Bitcoin would take months. It's 1,000 times slower. Could take years to settle your transaction. It is a downgrade in a significant fashion. And Solana would take weeks. This is just math, guys. Bitcoin's never going to be able to scale to that. It still could hit $1 million, $2 million a token, in my opinion, off just being a pet rock that hedges inflation. As soon as you get countries, endowment funds, pensions, I mean, you get everyone flooding in, right? It could easily 10x from here. But we're not going to be using Bitcoin for anything other than a pet rock to hedge inflation. That's what it was engineered for. Large sums of money could be moved with it. It's still slow as dirt, but it's faster than, Fedwire, unless everyone's doing it. And then, it'll take literally years to settle a transaction. So you really got to ask yourself, how do you get exposure to crypto being used every day? Because it's not Bitcoin. And that's where I'm going to leave the cliffhanger, because I got tons of videos talking about that. My entire channel is about that, and my fund is about that. So if you want to learn about that, make sure you sub and keep watching my videos, get educated on this space. This video is mainly going to be me recounting all of the research I've done on the Bitcoin Renaissance narrative and all of the technical developments. If I think of anything while I'm kind of just spewing here, I'll take over to a screen share and show you some resources. I might end up doing that anyways. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. First thing to understand, and I made a video about this about a year ago, talking about Bitcoin being a dirty old grandma, and that's still true. That has not changed. Bitcoin will not change. It has a 7 to 12 transaction per second throughput. It is proof of work, which is the most energy demanding and slowest consensus method out there. It's old. Moore's law, right? Every 18 months, technology doubles. Well, we're kind of, you couldn't tell by now, we're in the exponential growth period of that. Since the first computer to present day, it's almost 60 years. But that also means a 10-year-old project, doubling every 18 months, is more like 24 years old. Bitcoin's 15 years old. It's almost a 40-year-old piece of technology in terms of what it's competing against. If you were to compare the highest throughput EVM parallelized thing to Bitcoin, it is that old, right? And that's just the nature of Moore's law and the technology. It just goes really, really fast. I need you to understand that so then you can understand what the hell's going on, okay? Because now we have layer 2s, we have DeFi tokens, which is crazy, and we have NFTs on top of Bitcoin, which is not a smart contract platform. There is no code like that, no logic in Bitcoin. I mean, there's logic, but it's just a ledger, okay? And it's send and receive, that's it. Some really smart people have basically jerry-rigged Bitcoin to allow all of this functionality. Casey Rodmore is a guy you need to look into. He has changed Bitcoin forever with his ordinals protocol, which has allowed for both inscriptions and runes. Runes are DeFi tokens embedded directly into a Satoshi. So you can mint tokens by buying a Satoshi and using the ordinals protocol, which is just crazy. So now there's DeFi tokens called runes, and they're being listed on exchanges through ICP, and eventually that'll be bridged everywhere, and people will be able to speculate on runes, no different than they speculate on meme coins and shit coins on Solana, Ethereum, Base, and everywhere else. So now we have meme coins and shit coins. That's their only purpose. They have no functionality. They have no smart contract functionality. There's no utility. They are just memes, so you all are aware. But Bitcoin is now, allowing that, which is crazy. No one in the world thought that would be possible. Then basically the same idea, no different than runes. It's in a different part of the block of Bitcoin, but basically ordinals protocol can allow you to write to a Bitcoin block and put images in there, which have turned into NFTs with its own marketplace and everything else. With no ability to do either of those functions, Casey has been able to develop code that has allowed Bitcoin to facilitate both of those activities, which is just pure genius. But there are some serious consequences, and that's what I am getting to in this video. Fees are approaching $200 a transaction. Bitcoin is not engineered to deal with this much demand. We will never be able to get out of this unless we figure out a way to scale Bitcoin. That leads us to layer 2s. But what I want you to understand is this is a serious thing. If we don't figure this out, if there's no layer 2 that can support this behavior to take it off of the layer 1, we're running into a situation where for us to have 1 billion users on Bitcoin, as an example, you might be spending $5,000 to transfer and wait much longer than traditional finance because it's just not fast enough for this kind of stuff. Ergo, layer 2s. Layer 2s are buckets of code, as I describe here on this channel, but essentially just here's Bitcoin, here's a thing, a bucket of code, okay? Like Merlin, Stacks, Lightning, lots of attempts at it. Bit EVM, tons. And what they are doing now is trying to take pieces of Bitcoin off the layer 1, like we did in Ethereum, right? And isolate a layer 2 to only do that one function. So it is possible that someone figures this layer 2 solution out, builds an app that can utilize zero knowledge rollups technology, no different than Ethereum, to submit every 30 minutes a batch order into Bitcoin and reduce the demand of the layer 1. Excellent in theory, but again, Bitcoin is not built for this stuff. If we keep improving demand, computational demand on Bitcoin and demand for its block spaces with more use cases for its blocks without figuring this out, it is doomsday for Bitcoin, unfortunately. Although I have faith we will figure it out. I really do. The nice thing about this, and there are positives. I don't mean to be doomy and gloomy. The positive is you're going to have miners making a lot of money on fees. And with the halving getting more and more extreme, we went from 6.25 to 3.1, or maybe it's 6.25, yeah, to 3.125. That's what it is. And then after this next one, so in 4 years' time, that's even less. And then after that, it's basically moot. We're just talking about decimals of decimals. So they need income. They need revenue for supporting Bitcoin. It's just, it can't be at the expense of the retail user the current way it's working. I have faith this will all flesh out, but this is probably the sketchiest Bitcoin has felt in a long time, and the community is getting divided over it. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I recommend you do your own research on everything you've heard today. I think this is cool though. Okay, I think it's very cool. I am constantly looking for Bitcoin Renaissance. Oh, that's the last thing. All of this is Bitcoin Renaissance. That is the narrative that all of this falls under. So Bitcoin being revitalized and being re-engineered and repurposed to do all this cool stuff and everything in that ecosystem and all the developers and engineers that are working towards this end. Super interesting, but no, Bitcoin Foundation is wishy-washy on it, and it is definitely separating the community into two camps. I don't know who will win, but either way, I'm a big fan of Bitcoin. I'm going to be holding it until I give it to my kids. So just be aware of the state Bitcoin's in. The Bitcoin network is changing in real time. And on this channel, we're going to talk about what it means for Bitcoin in the future. This is a deep dive into layer 2s, specifically from one of the followers that we have asking about layer 2s on Rock. So there's a tweet thread we're going to go through, and we're going to actually analyze the conversation with AI, show you what's going on with Bitcoin layer 2s in general. But first, I feel like you need to understand what layer 2s are, so you can understand how they function on Ethereum and on Bitcoin, and what the pros and cons are, what it means for crypto at large, that we're going into this more modular thesis as it pertains to blockchains. First, what I want to show you is the difference between a layer 1 and a layer 2 from an architectural perspective. A layer 1 is a massive amount. So this is everyone that's installed Bitcoin or Ethereum and has a computer either mining or validating the ledger. This is what creates all of these things. Bob's computer, Jim's computer, you get it. And there's 400,000 on Ethereum and over 1 million on Bitcoin. And that's what a layer 1 is. It's just a bunch of volunteers for profit giving up all their computers to the network by installing its software, and then the network uses its hardware the software is installed on to provide these things through a protocol that is the software you download. Layer 2s look more like this. So there's something to be said for layer 2s, that they are more centralized. There's a lot less validator nodes. They have their own nodes sometimes. What really you want to take away from this is the layer 1 does not stop existing with a layer 2. Layer 2s are a different kind of user of the original network. So in Ethereum, there's hundreds of these things. Arbitrum, Optimism, Base, ZK Sync. There's just like plenty of these things. There's like a plethora. Essentially, Bitcoin is getting to the same kind of situation where you're going to have all of these layer 2s. They are going to be more customers of the network, no different than, a user. So there's this pool of people that buy the block space, and then there's all of these people, all of the users. They have their own fee pool on Ethereum. So these different pooled people or users, these types of customers that buy block space, they're different because layer 2s actually take some of these functions away from the layer 1 on the execution. That's the biggest one. Execution is an actual computation like, hey, user A is sending X amount of ETH to user B, or X amount of Bitcoin. The network charges its native token, Ether or Bitcoin, for that computation, for whatever you're asking it to do. A smart contract call, it doesn't really matter. And that execution is what earns the revenue for the layer 1. This is where the problem becomes. Layer 2s actually do the execution, okay? That is a big thing that layer 2s are taking from layer 1s. They are taking the execution off of the main chain. So what they do is you transact off chain. These guys are doing stuff not on the layer 1. They're over here in layer 2 world, and they're doing all of their stuff here. Every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 10 minutes, every layer 2 is different. They bulk all of this activity and then submit one packet of data for that entire 10 minutes. So they basically have an epoch, once an hour, 4 times an hour, something like that, 6 times an hour. And then they submit to Ethereum for settlement, security, and then this data availability piece isn't always the layer 1 even, which is more revenue for the layer 1. Sometimes this ends up in a third-party DA layer like Near or Celestia. But we use the layer 1 as layer 2's for security and settlement, meaning every 10 minutes I'm going to post your transactions on Ethereum. So they're there. But we're doing all this stuff off chain. And this causes a lot of pros and cons. Pros, it's much faster, which we're about to get into specifically for Bitcoin. Cons, it's more centralized and less secure, and it leaches value out of the layer 1, which is an important thing to make note of, genuinely. Now, hopefully layer 2s make a little bit more sense. To summarize it in a sentence, layer 2s take execution off of layer 1s. They do it all off chain, and it runs alongside a layer 1. That's it. That's what a layer 2 is. Now, specifically, one of our followers here had a conversation with Grok, just Michael96, and it was brought to our attention that, maybe we should have a video on this, and I thought, well, why not? Real quick, he's trying to understand what Bitcoin can handle. And that's not a typo. Bitcoin can do 7 transactions per second. That's not great. Bitcoin mainnet, not better. Slightly better, 13, 14 on Ethereum. But on layer 2s, you can get a lot more, right? Because it's a completely different thing that's upgraded, modified, running alongside, and it just submits its transactions in bulk, right? As one order, one packet to the layer 1. So they can get a lot faster. This is kind of the target that we're going for. This is the current, I guess, TPS a network would need to support all of the transactions that occur in a ecosystem. I thought this was a really interesting question. Essentially, can Bitcoin handle this many transactions in a manner for affordable fees? Like, can it actually happen? Grok said Bitcoin's base layer can't handle 54,000 TPS, but Lightning scales of thousands, potentially millions of transactions per second off-chain with fees under a cent. Congestion risks remain for on-chain settlements during peaks. For sheer speed, Solana 65K or Ripple 1.5K excel in high volume payments, though they trade some decentralization for it. By the way, so do layer 2s. That's another video. It's really important to understand that Grok is saying Lightning Network could scale Bitcoin to a massive, we could be doing DeFi on it, we could do stable coins on it, we can basically turn Bitcoin into Ethereum using layer 2s. That's the vision, that's the dream, that's the Bitcoin Renaissance, industry. That's what everyone wants to do. That's basically what we're trying to figure out. Does it work? Lightning, does it work? Is this something that could actually happen? Grok believes that it is a layer 2 built directly on top of Bitcoin's layer, as we talked about earlier. It functions entirely with the Bitcoin ecosystem using payment channels anchored to the blockchain for off-chain transactions with on-chain settlement for opening, closures, and disputes. It doesn't rely on a separate network. Michael wanted to know, is this functionality present since Bitcoin's inception? If no, then how is it possible that Bitcoin's programming upgraded to allow layer 2s? So this right here is something, we're going to go back to the screen in a second. This is something I really want you all to understand. Layer 2s exist on Ethereum because Ethereum was built for that. It is a smart contracts platform from inception. The reason why Bitcoin can do layer 2s now is because it took computer scientists, developers, and researchers over a decade to find or think of a workaround to Bitcoin's core protocol. Now, I have some stuff to show you, but in general, this is, I call it an exploit. AI thinks I'm being dramatic in calling it an exploit. But there is a specific part of a Bitcoin block. So inside of the block, there's components of how data gets submitted. There's a header, a body, a footer, in a messaging system. Okay, so there's 4 components. That messaging system, UTXO, is where layer 2s are submitting their data. So this original messaging system was just between the nodes, the miners, and it's just to let them know that the block was checked. So what we're doing is we're cramming Merkle root trees, which are how layer 2s really submit a bunch of data really cheaply and efficiently. It's an encryption method. So we're putting these long strings, is what you got to think of it. Just long things that could be submitted to the blockchain inside of a block that represents a host of transactions off-chain. Again, AI thinks I'm being dramatic, but the core of Bitcoin Renaissance is built off of an exploit or manipulating a part of the Bitcoin block just to allow for more data to be submitted. And miners are approving it or allowing it, in specific miners. So this is not something that Bitcoin was engineered to do. The core protocol hasn't changed. We are simply using a workaround. If you were a researcher, you would not call it an exploit. And I guess neither would AI. But if you were to talk socially with people and describe what you were doing outside of this context, it would be an exploit, in my opinion. I have over a decade of software experience, and this feels like shaky ground. I want to preface all of this with my opinion. Now, personally, as a disclosure, my fund is invested in STX. I personally am invested in STX. I think it's one of the best teams attempting this. So I could be wrong, but in general, I don't want to miss the boat if I am. So I have a small allocation towards one of these protocols that are doing this. If we go to the screen, you're going to look at my interactions with AI and some sources. These are not considered an exploit by AI. They do a good job of explaining it with a little bit more detail. So we already covered how they work. The reason as to how they work, it's a lot more scalable. Every single person down here is competing for block space, and then every single computer has to update the ledger every 10 minutes a block is completed. And we're all competing in basically a mempool. All the transactions are getting done sequentially. And it can only do 7 transactions a second, 10-minute blocks. That's why fees get really high. Over here, that doesn't really apply. It just doesn't. They're logging it in longer time frames. They're not charging you anything, right? Outside of a small fee, which they profit significantly on. And then they basically take all of your fees, pay maybe 5. I mean, these are 93% gross margin businesses. So literally 5, 7, 10% max to pay Bitcoin for the block space. And they're just cramming all of the transactions into that block. So it allows it to scale a lot easier and have reduced fees. And then since you can build your own layer 2 with its own execution, you can basically build smart contract functionality. You could just repeat what's already being done on Ethereum and is successful, right? Because it's its own independent thing, and it doesn't rely on Bitcoin's layer 1 to execute or implement any logic of any kind. But these are things to consider. So since it's a separate thing and it's more centralized, it would be real easy to get 6 out of 9 validators to do something it shouldn't on the layer 2 and submit it to the Bitcoin layer 1 as an example. So that could be a risk to any layer 2. It is way more centralized than the layer 1. Another thing is if you're trying to essentially build smart contract functionality on top of a workaround on the Bitcoin network, there could be increased likelihood of more vulnerabilities for whatever you build on top of Lightning. Lightning has had a lot of years of development. They have come a long way. I've heard better and better things from developer friends, but in general, you are duct taping solutions into Bitcoin. Outside of that, this is actually kind of a cool thing. So like Chainlink's actually working with the Bitcoin layer 2 ecosystem, and they had a really cool chart I wanted to show you guys before I get into my thoughts on all this. There is a strong correlation to network growth and Chainlink. That's why I invest in Chainlink, and I'm a Chainlink bull completely. I just thought this was really interesting for you guys to see. And they are actually working with Bitcoin layer 2s. Essentially, they function the same as Ethereum. They're saying all the things that I'm telling you. Oh, and there we go. And then, okay, yeah, this was there it is. So the risks, basically they're saying nothing has really been built out and implemented completely. It's kind of interesting that Ledger's actually using stacks, which is actually really cool to see. But also, like, there are higher risks due to the nature of these layer 2s. Lightning's been around, I think, since 2017-ish. In 22, an unattributed payment routing failure due to a bug. So there were faulty nodes. Again, these are more centralized, and it went without being noticed. Where if you had if you were on the layer 1, you had 1 million computers checking the state, obviously it would have been discovered, and we've never had an issue on Bitcoin with this kind of stuff. So, ultimately, Bitcoin layer 2s are good for the layer 2s. I think they're net bad for the user, because if your stuff is in a Bitcoin layer 2, it's not getting on a Bitcoin layer 1 chain the same way that an Ethereum layer 2 would be. That's the first thing. And, secondly, Ethereum was built for layer 2s. That is not true for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is engineered to be a pet rock. That's what it is. It is a pet rock. 7 transactions per second was the best they could do at the time it was built, but ultimately is a feature, not a bug. All that means is you're just going to be doing highly valuable transactions. You don't mind waiting 10 minutes when you're used to waiting 2 weeks. If I wanted to move $1 billion of liquidity and I wanted it to settle and I wanted it all to go well, you're genuinely want to wait weeks, where I could send you that exact amount of Bitcoin and it's done, inside of 10 minutes if you were doing those kinds of transactions. The only reason you would do that is is to hold it. Look at all these treasury companies. Look at Sailor. Look at BlackRock. They're not doing anything with their Bitcoin. They are sucking it out of exchanges and they are holding it like they're supposed to. And these are the smartest people in the world playing the largest game of high finance you could ever play. It is a pet rock. You will get to millions of dollars a token without DeFi. And I think the user would rather be able to bridge assets easily, safely, securely, with confidence. I think they would prefer to do their DeFi stuff in an ecosystem where all that stuff has been built and used by millions of people for over a decade, like on Ethereum. I think this really is only a win for the layer 2s because it is such a profitable business. You can basically get millions of transactions, charge per transaction, be way cheaper than Bitcoin, and then pay literally 5% of your revenue to Bitcoin for submitting the data. It's an incredibly profitable business. I really think the only winner here is the layer 2s. And then you also have to consider that these layer 2s are going to be congesting the network with their activity in addition to the users. So Bitcoin's main function being expanded on top of a workaround, I call it an exploit, just seems like a bad move in general, in my opinion. I think it corrupts the idea of Bitcoin. Now, in terms of will it materially impact Bitcoin, I do not think this stuff is going to tank Bitcoin. I do not think it's going to negatively impact the network long term. I think it will be a side quest for the Bitcoin maxis that would prefer to have an NFT on a Bitcoin layer 2 owned primarily by a company, which seems against their thesis of decentralization, but I'm not here to throw stones here. I'm just saying this is a side quest that could blossom into something more and push Bitcoin higher, or it is neutral. So this is generally not a bad thing. I just personally am not a fan of what's going on. And I think I would personally not build. I might take a 2% flyer, which is what I did on Stacks, which I think is the coolest of them all. Lightning just has a lot of baggage and tech debt they've had to reprogram out of. I don't know. Lightning was first to market. You can't get a token on Lightning, so I can't get exposure to it. I would probably have done 1% in each if I could have, but I really do like the Stacks team and what they're doing in terms of if you believe in this fully and you're going to build this, I think they're doing it the right way. If you like content like this, hit the sub. I bring nothing but unfederated thoughts and opinions to you all to help you understand this asset class and better navigate the waters, because it is volatile, it is choppy, it is intense. But this is, in my opinion, the coolest industry and the best place to be putting my money. What is Bitcoin mining? Very interesting stuff. It's changing the world, whether you like it or not, and I want you to understand the basics of it. This is not a deep dive, this is beginner level information. Bitcoin mining, very simply, in the current stack of the internet, everyone owns their own stuff. This is called monolithic, vertical, there's tons of words for it, but just imagine this being Amazon. Amazon owns the website, the server, all the data you put in there, the user information, all the way down the stack. They own the entire stack. That's Amazon. Now, Web3, draw a line here, instead of Amazon, like Jeff Bezos owning all of this, right? It's going to be like 8 people get together, and then they're like, okay, we're going to start this thing, and we need to incentivize people, like Bitcoin, for example. They got together and made Bitcoin. We're going to incentivize people to invest in this network and build it instead of us having to go out and buy all this stuff. So the way we do that is we make a token. Then we decide what this token does. Bitcoin specifically said, hey, we're only going to have 21 million of them, and we're going to put a decent amount in this little vault here. Think of it as escrow. And they're not going to leave, ever. Out of this 21 million, 30% ended up here. Then they decided we're going to keep 10% to ourselves, Satoshi Nakamoto's wallet. And then the other 60% is going to be used as incentives and network fees and everything else. So this is like what people were buying in the beginning, these circulating tokens, and then this stuff has been trickling out over time. Basic example, okay? So you need to understand 21 million tokens locked up forever, never going away. You can't make more Bitcoin. And they get unlocked somehow, which we're about to get into, Bitcoin mining. And the rest of the tokens are kind of out there and we all trade hands with them, even though most of them have been wiped out. Like, I think 20 something percent of these circulating tokens are in wallets that have lost keys, people have died. You get it. So really, instead of 21 million, there's more like, 3 million left roughly in total across the globe. So you have to buy it from someone like me in the next 5 years probably. So you have all of these tokens up here, right? We're in that vault, the escrow account. And remember, their problem was we need people to invest in this. We need computers. So why would someone go buy a $5,000 computer to build a network and make a blockchain? In my other video, you would know that we have ledgers here on each computer. And that's what makes this a blockchain. All of the transactions are on each running node. They're all on a ledger and they all maintain the same state. So for Bitcoin to exist like this, why would I, a random stranger, go buy a computer to set this up? Well, I get paid Bitcoin for doing all the execution or math on this network. So if you, a user, send money to another user, the computers that are doing that, they get paid two ways. In a fee, a portion of your Bitcoin is going to the miner, okay, for a fee of supporting your transaction, and also for mining. Since everything's encrypted, for the receiving computer to read it, a password has to be put in. And, encryption's a fancy word for a password through math. And then this computer has to run a calculation, okay? And when it's done, it's going to solve the problem and get rewarded from this bucket. So as miners support the network, they get a little bit. This is a human. Okay, they get two, 1 and 2. 1, they're going to get a little bit of the Bitcoin being sent. And then 2, they're going to get rewarded for doing the encryption and solving the problem. So you both get your Bitcoin safely and with no one in the middle. That is what mining is. Okay, that's how it works. I buy a computer, plug in wall, let people do their thing on the network. My computer gets a little piece. I'm one computer out of 700 something thousand computers, so I get like a little piece. And I get new Bitcoin for for doing that, and I also get a piece of your Bitcoin because I'm investing in this hardware to allow you the opportunity to actually use it. And that is Bitcoin mining. That's how Bitcoin works. That's why everyone's interested in it, because it is volunteer ran out of any government, completely commoditized, and supported by the networking community itself. You are investing in energy because I'm getting electricity, capturing the cost of that electricity and the value of the token. There's a lot of stuff there. That's more intermediate and advanced. We'll get into that into another video, but right now, that is Bitcoin mining. A comparison of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and meme coins. If you can articulate what Bitcoin is, you're a beginner. Like, if that's where you start and end, beginner. If you can articulate the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, I would call you an intermediate. And then if you know the difference between Ethereum and basically Solana, I would call you advanced. And then Solana versus meme coins, I would call you expert. And the reason is all these technologies dramatically change. But for me, right now, today, we're going to just get you from beginner to intermediate, and advanced at a very, very, very high level. We are building a course to dive deep into these topics, but I'm just going to be brushing over them to help you at least start your research, because you should never take anything you find online as gospel until you come to your own conclusions. That includes me. Let's get into it. Bitcoin. Okay. Bitcoin is a dirty old grandma. I'm not kidding. Bitcoin is literally garbage, and it's actually a feature, not a bug. What I mean by that is, since it can only do 7 transactions per second and it only has a 10-minute block time, time, meaning every 10 minutes a block is made, which is crazy. And it's proof of work. That means Bitcoin is super slow, doesn't process a lot, and that actually makes its block space super valuable. It makes it valuable because, actually, it makes me think of an analogy. When you go deposit a paycheck every 2 weeks, do you take an armored vehicle with guards? No. But if you were buying $10 billion of oil from China, maybe. Bitcoin is like all of its technical deficiencies that have been built over for the past 17 years makes Bitcoin a slow, secure, the most secure block space. I mean, almost 1 million computers running it. It's the most secure network, period. And since it's so slow, you don't really want to do small transactions on it. You're going to want to do big transactions on it. And since it doesn't have smart contract functionality, which is the difference, the only difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, I wouldn't say the only, the largest difference, is you don't have smart contracts on Bitcoin. We'll get into that, but that means it's only used to move money. And since it's so slow and expensive, and if we were buying coffee, let's say, on Bitcoin, it would take months to settle. Billion people, like, just impossible. It's kind of like winning the F1 race with a cardboard box. It doesn't really matter how you do it. With just cardboard, it's going to tear apart in the wind, you know, like, it's just not going to work. Now, the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's smart contracts. Smart contracts are basically, I'll do another analogy, okay? A vending machine is probably the first example of a smart contract. You put your money in, so you fund the contract, or you fund the machine. You can see where all the products are. You know the terms. I put in $1.50, I put in my number and letter, and then I get that product. The computer in that vending machine has all of the terms it needs to execute a function. Are dollars met? Yes. Okay. Input. This is what they want. A3. Cool. I give you A3. We walk away. It's a one-way transaction. If you mistype that, you got to put in another dollar. Smart contracts are the same way. But instead of a Diet Coke, you can get a treasury bill. You can get gold, you can get equity in an internet protocol, you can buy data, you can buy compute and storage and all this other stuff, and you don't need an employee. It's like a vending machine. It's automated. Hey everybody, it's JT. Just in case you didn't know, I would love a sub. Almost 97% of you that have viewed our content have not subscribed, and it would mean the world to me if you just hit that sub button, give us a like, and let us know how we're doing. All right, back to the content. So it's automating business processes in exchanging value. Bitcoin can't do that, and it really does change how the internet is going to work. So the difference between Ethereum and Bitcoin is smart contracts. Also performance. Ethereum is a lot faster, 30-second blocks instead of 10 minutes. And with its layer 2s, it's getting its TPS, or transactions per second, closer to 50 instead of 7. It's still incredibly slow and expensive, but layer 2s are making it almost free to use, and they're a lot faster. We have some layer 2s getting a few hundred transactions per second. I'll do the Solana thing. The difference between Ethereum and Solana is they both have smart contracts, so they're, you know, the ability to automate transactions, absolutely there. But Solana has 400 millisecond block times and can do thousands of transactions per second. This would allow for retail to put in 100 orders inside of a minute and not get front ran and pay all this money and all this other crazy stuff. It's important to know that the way these blockchains are designed directly impacts the kind of businesses that can use these blockchains instead of Google or AWS or Apple or any of them. You also have to understand you can do things on Ethereum you can't do on Bitcoin, and you can do things on Solana you can't do on Ethereum. Just is. That's just how it is. It's computer science, guys. Now we got meme coins. The casino, the gambling, the degenerates. I hate meme coins. I think they're great for onboarding users, but in general, you'd be surprised to know they are copies of Solana or Ethereum. Shiba Inu is a copy of Ethereum, literally fourth the block. Dogecoin is a copy of Bitcoin. And the other million tokens on Pumped Off Fun are all copies of Solana. Literally copy paste, guys. And when you copy paste it, you can change whatever you want. You can make it your own. You can change the logo into a dog, and you can make the website, the white paper, all of it. It's all yours. It's open sourced, so that means anyone in the world can do anything they want with it. And then some smart guy was like, you know what if we just made creating a Solana blockchain automated and let them add some logos and stuff, and we'll just change everything, and boom, they have a new Solana blockchain. And that's what meme coins are. It's a direct copy, and When they copy it, they can change anything they want. They could say, okay, for every dollar that comes in, 90% goes to my wallet and 10% goes to the treasury that I'll eventually rug pull, and there's nothing they can do about it. So you're buying someone's copy of Solana that has their own rules on it, and you're basically just financing their hopes and ambitions and losing the majority of the time. And that's the big difference between all. If you want to learn more about this, reach out, leave a comment. I will add it to the course, add it to our community, help you all better understand exactly what this stuff is and how to identify what is a meme coin, what is a smart contract platform, and what do these smart contract platforms offer compared to one another. What are their competitive advantages and differences? And does any of it affect Bitcoin? Today, we're going to be talking about the impact of inflation. And I want to unpack that word inflation so we know what we're talking about. Inflation just means that the money supply is getting more saturated. Or another way to explain it would be if I just had this one pen, and this was the only pen in the world, it would be far more valuable compared to having 50 trillion pens out there in the world. And if we used pens as a currency, the difference between one pen, maybe one pen is worth $50 trillion versus 50 trillion pens and each one is worth $1. If I was to buy something in the latter example, it would take way more pens to buy it than if there was less pens. It's the same exact concept with dollars, okay? So inflation is referring to this concept that the money supply is expanding at a specific percent, and it compounds like anything else in investing. So if we're going 2% a year, well, 50 years from now, we go from 800 billion to 50 trillion, and that's basically how it's played out. I have a really nice picture to show you that just in the past, 11 years, so since 2014, the level of increase to money supply. And we're not just going to be talking about America's inflation. We're talking about global inflation. Now, global inflation is monitored or summarized as global M2 money supply. I just did a podcast episode talking about this, but there's a few different schedules or types of money. There's M1, which is dollars or inflation being released, dollars flooding the market directly from the Fed. And then there's M2, which is the money that is quote unquote washed by the banks, meaning they take that new money, the M1, and then they use it to loan it out to businesses, people, cars, like all the debt we use to finance our lives. That is M2. When you look at M2, you have a dramatic increase. And this is inflation, okay? What I'm about to show you. This pink line is M2. That's 59 trillion back in May of 13. And now it is at 107. So M2 has doubled, completely doubled. And that is in, 12 years it's doubled? Now, the white line, this is where we tie the topics together. Now that you understand inflation and you see what they're doing. This is the globe. This is not America. If we look at, and actually, I want to show you real quick. That brings up a good point. Our friend Fred, this is the Federal Reserve database here. I'll go look at America's M2. So 21 trillion. We'll round that up. 21.8. We'll round that up to 22 trillion. 22 trillion out of 107. So America is roughly 1/5 of the entire money supply in the world out of 200 something countries, which is really important to know. And that's also why everyone cares what America does. Not only is it a fifth of all the money in the world, it's also used in most of the trade, plus 60% of global trade. And when people sell their products to America in dollars, that means we are printing money, giving it to people to then import their goods. And then when they make a profit off our consumerism, they invest back into America through securities and debt instruments. And that's what's basically kept money going for so long, in America at least. That's really the only country that has that luxury. Now look at this global expansion of M2, this huge mountain here. That is the COVID response. And if you look at the correlation between M2 and Bitcoin price, right? We're talking about how inflation affects cryptocurrency investing. Well, Bitcoin matters the most because when we look at the entire market, Bitcoin is 63.7%. The total market cap is 3.2 trillion. Bitcoin is literally 2/3 of it. So Bitcoin's price drives the entire cryptocurrency market. And you can see it has a very strong correlation to inflation. I mean, just this little peek up here, Bitcoin, this is the belly of the bear market. Bitcoin's at 19,000. M2 was trending down. And then right about here, we go from 103 trillion to M2 to 105 by this time. Bitcoin went, so $2 trillion added to the world, $2 trillion of inflation. Remember, the pink line's M2. We print all this money. And then you can see Bitcoin responding much later. M2 was printed 97 up to 104. That's a better mark. 97 up to 104, roughly. And Bitcoin goes from 15,000 to 72,000. And M2 just stayed stagnant and even went down a little. And then that final leg up, 101 to 105, it went back up. And generally speaking, M2 is a leading indicator. So inflation is a leading indicator to Bitcoin price. This little spike up from 105, I'm sorry, what is this? 105 trillion up to 107 trillion. This $2 trillion added right here could drive Bitcoin price higher. I mean, there's a 95 something % correlation. And you got fear at 50. People are not that bullish. It's right down the middle. The main point I want you to walk away from this video is, if you hear anyone in any country talking about cutting their rates, adding programs, basically the government expanding their responsibilities monetarily, meaning they're going to print money, anytime you hear someone talking about printing money or raising the deficit or anything like that, that is bullish for Bitcoin. We've not had the altcoin rally. I don't know if it's bullish for everything in crypto, but for Bitcoin, it is very bullish. And you got to look 3 months in the rears to really understand where Bitcoin's going next quarter and the following quarter. And we keep having quantitative easing. We keep having countries print money and flood the system. And if that continues, Bitcoin will keep going up. Today, we have a very exciting topic, which is basically Coinbase offering the exact solution or strategy that I personally am implementing in my life, which is loans on your Bitcoin specifically, which is great. And I think they're going to expand that service to other tokens. But for right now, Coinbase, a public company, is offering loans on your Bitcoin. And I want to dive into exactly what that looks like, how that's possible, and potential opportunities to profit from that solution without having to own coin, the stock. Like, there's still some cryptos that'll do well as Coinbase rolls out this service more and more over time. I have an article for you straight from Coinbase that you can now get a USDC loan without selling your Bitcoin. So what does that mean? It means that, let's say you have 10 Bitcoin and you got $1 million in Coinbase. I know that's a lot, but let's just say that's you. And if you sold it, you would be privy to either short-term or long-term capital gains. That's anywhere from, I want to say, 15 up to 40, depending on the state you live in America. And it all depends on if you've held it longer than a year. So if you've held it longer than a year, just like stocks, you'll pay a long-term capital gains tax. If you've owned it less than a year, you'll pay a short-term capital gains tax, which really depends on your strategy and what you think is best. I am discretionarily long, so I have long-term taxes, but my whole thing is accumulate, keep buying, keep investing, especially when it dips, especially in a bear market. And once you've accumulated enough digital assets, instead of selling them, you can take a loan against them. When you do that, you don't trigger a taxable event. So if you have 1 million Bitcoin and you want a $600,000 loan to go buy fourplex cash that's stabilized, that's basically what I want to do. You could use the rent and the cash flow from that property to pay off your loan against the Bitcoin. Obviously you'd have to map this out. And then you can recycle, once the loan's paid off, you can recycle it into other properties. And you'll never have to sell your Bitcoin. You'll be accumulating real world assets, and you'll never pay taxes, which is awesome. So that's the general get rich wealthy, strategy of mine. I am not a get rich quick meme coin trader. I'm an investor, and I have a long-term outlook on these assets. So I am here for the long game. And this is a tool in our box that we have been waiting for a very long time, because if you don't have anyone willing to underwrite your Bitcoin and take a loan on it, then you can't really do that. And the fact that Coinbase is doing this, a public company, it's profound, and it's ushering in this wave of adoption that we've all been waiting for. The second thing that I really want you guys to know is that all of this is possible. And I want to see. So the way it works is using Morpho, which is honestly interesting. The fact that Coinbase chose Morpho instead of Aave to offer this service. Aave's been around 5 years longer. It's got probably 10 times the amount of liquidity and capital. And yet they chose Morpho based on Morpho's design, based on Morpho's offering, which is super, super cool. Because basically, Aave is something that you're very rigid in Aave. Like, you have to use Aave exactly how it's built. It's not very composable. It's not modular. There's no way for you to modify it or anything else. Where Morpho is more like Rails. So, hey, you want to make your own Aave? You want to make your own lending protocol? Just use our Rails. Just use our frameworks. Just use our tools. And that's really the difference between Morpho and Aave. And that's why Coinbase chose Morpho. They chose Morpho because it's more composable. And it's built on their layer 2 base. Coinbase has a layer 2, if you guys didn't know. So the fact that Morpho is built on base, and it allows them to basically customize their lending protocol, their own lending protocol. It gives them the power. And this is just a trend I think we're going to continue to see in crypto. We're going to see modularity take its place. We're going to see composability, these values, be held in higher regard as these larger companies decide to pick technology to build with. I think maintaining a decentralized public place like Ethereum, where Base is built and settles on, right, is really important for transparency. It's also super awesome to see teams that can maintain this decentralized vector that we care about so much and still offer the composability of a private solution. Hey everybody, it's JT. Just in case you didn't know, I would love a sub. Almost 97% of you that have viewed our content have not subscribed, and it would mean the world to me if you just hit that sub button, give us a like, and let us know how we're doing. All right, back to the content, which is why Coinbase landed on Morpho. And I have a feeling that more and more of this kind of thing is going to proliferate in crypto. It's going to get more important. Brian Armstrong's a very smart man. Aave's been around a very long time. Trump decided to build World Liberty Financial on top of Aave, and Coinbase decided to implement Morpho. They both have their place. It really does depend on really what you're going for, I think Coinbase chose Morpho because they want to eventually offer loans on more than just Bitcoin. I think they want to be able to offer loans on a lot of other things. Aave is stuck in the EVM. Morpho has plans of expanding, and I could honestly see that, Coinbase and others are going to continue to use Morpho. And that's part of the the stuff that we cover here on this channel. It's the fundamentals. So going into Morpho's design and the first principles that they implement, their values in the network and the community, and seeing how that plays over the long term. Because the fact that they built Morpho a specific way is why Coinbase chose Morpho instead of Aave. Different tools, different use cases. It's all about utility, which is what we talk about here. And we like to buy utilitarian projects that their token is representative of resources that only that network provides. And then we buy the supply of those resources, or the tokens that represent those resources, in the hopes that demand increases over the future. No different than Bitcoin. It's a buy and hold strategy that has done well, and really there's not another asset class where you can take that kind of approach and do this well. Is World War III good for Bitcoin or not? And I feel like after, Israel destroys Iran's nuclear efforts, and then Iran, in short order, answers with hundreds of missiles to Israel that break through the Iron Dome. They are mobilizing their Navy. They are mobilizing their Air Force. It looks like we're going to be in another regional conflict between Israel and Iran, in addition to Russia and Ukraine. Two regional conflicts might be one away from World War III, okay? And we have China and Taiwan heating up. Very scary stuff. And you're probably sitting here wondering, where should I invest my money? Or am I going to die in a nuclear war, right? So, in general, I, as a hedge fund manager, have been asking this question for over 2 years as this situation has devolved. It's something that is a chief concern of mine. And I finally have some analysis for you guys. Let's get into it. Is World War III good or bad for Bitcoin? I bring one chart over to you first. So this chart is showing the correlation of M2 global supply. M2 is the amount of money that, this is global, so the entire world, every industrialized nation, how much money have they printed and that is circulating in the world in terms of dollars? They all have their own currency, but in terms of dollars, how much money is being released into the world? Okay, that's the general gist of this. And then it's overlaying the Bitcoin price, and it's showing a strong correlation, right? M2 is pink, Bitcoin is white. Every hike up, Bitcoin shortly follows. Now you can see M2 pumping right now, and the price is kind of going up. Hey everybody, it's JT. Just in case you didn't know, I would love a sub. Almost 97% of you that have viewed our content have not subscribed, and it would mean the world to me if you just hit that sub button, give us a like, and let us know how we're doing. All right, back to the content. Down from a low of, it looks to be 80-ish, all the way up to 110 at its peak. M2 also went up from 105 to 109. There are some countries in South Asia that have done some quantitative easing, and it added about 5 trillion to the world supply of dollars, if you will, or money. In general, what we're seeing is the strongest correlation for Bitcoin is money printing. If you're going long Bitcoin, you're shorting the dollar. So then we have to ask, war, is it good or bad for money printing? According to AI, and just intuitively here, I'm going to leave this up so you can read while I talk to you if you'd like. Essentially, wars cost money. Governments need to print money to buy things from the, military industrial complex. Realistically, they're very expensive. They're probably the most expensive endeavor a country can jump into. I think that's the general premise, okay? It's expensive to fight in a war, yeah? Not only in resources, but in human resources too. I mean, Ukrainians have lost 500,000 of their fighting men. Those are families that are going to take a generation to recoup, like that population, and it's the working men as well. So, they're going to struggle for a very long time. Deciding to go into war is a dramatic decision for a government, and it costs a lot of money. And since Bitcoin hasn't really existed during a major conflict like World War III, as an example, it's better to go look at gold. Gold also is a hedge against money printing. It's God's money. It's the original hedge against fiat currency. Every single war results in soaring gold prices. There's a pattern of war leads to money printing leads to higher gold prices. Bitcoin behaves similar to gold in that way. It is more correlated to M2, just like gold, than it is to even gold itself. It's a closer representation of a fiat hedge because it's digitalized. You can trade it 24/7, 365, so it's more liquid, and the expression is realized faster in the market. Let's look at NASDAQ. Let's look at the companies, right? S&P 500, the actual businesses of America. These are all the wars it's seen since the Depression, and you can see it still goes up because of the money printing, really. I mean, it's all tied to the money printing. So the question is World War III good or bad for Bitcoin? I've come to the determination that it is good. It is really one of the few things that is good about World War III. Okay? Like, this is terrifying. This is awful. Millions of people can die. We all might die if nuclear weapons are used, and like, it's terrifying, and it could be a really bad thing. But if it doesn't get to that point and we all pull through as a human race, crypto people should be vibing. Okay? Like, Bitcoin's not a bad place to put your money. If you see, this is my opinion, and based on the historical data, I'm happy that I'm invested in crypto. It's the only asset class that I invest in. I'm genuinely excited for the government to print money from a financial perspective. The other, 95% of my soul is really sad for the state of affairs that we're in. And I don't like it at all. It's foolish. It's childish. They've been fighting like this for thousands of years, and I don't see it ever stopping, unfortunately. So I only focus on things I can't control. I can't control their feud, neither can you, right? But we can control how we are protecting our family's future. That's part prepping, right? Not being caught with your pants down, and also making sure that you have, you still, assuming we all don't die to nuclear threats, like, you still have a future for your children. Financially, set them up better. So that's why I made this video. It's a hot topic right now, as it should be. We all should be worried about this in a existential sense, but don't let it control your day-to-day. There's nothing you can do. Ultimately, Bitcoin should be going up if they keep printing money. That's what I believe. We'll see. I think I've been wrestling with this for about a year. I think war ultimately is good for Bitcoin and bad for humanity. There's your answer, though, guys. If you like this kind of content, or you want me to go in detail about all this stuff, I always do high-level stuff on YouTube, but I'd love to make an in-depth analysis video. If you have anything, send me your tickers, do whatever. I just want to engage with this community. We've been growing. I love to see it, and I want to thank you all for the support so far. I really appreciate it, and until next time, peace and love. Take care of one another. I'll see ya.